Thank you. Thank you for coming. I know that funeral planning is definitely the thing everybody thinks about talking and enjoying on a Sunday afternoon. So I will do my best to share my passion because I am very passionate about this. I want to share this with you. All right. A couple disclaimers. First of all, I am here as a support to support you in this process, but please do not take all that I'm saying, add it to what you've learned from the sessions before, from the lawyer, from Sheldon, almost so close, from Sheldon. Also the information you learned from Damien with regards to insurance and what you will learn from the grief support as well, okay? So we all work in tandem together. Please note, some of what I will say today, I will speak about death. I will use that word repeatedly throughout the presentation. If at any time you feel triggered, please go ahead. You can exit here, take some time, and when you're ready, return. Okay? Okay. A little bit of what we'll do today. First of all, we'll talk about New Haven, what New Haven is, who we are. Then we'll go over a little bit beyond the power of attorney. So you talked about that. We'll talk about a little more. Funeral pre-planning, of course, what that is. And we'll talk about what an executor might go through if and after someone has passed. Lastly, we'll share my passion, the importance of sharing your life story and talking to your family. And then there's a First Steps workbook available for you. All right, so first thing first, let's go over New Haven Funeral Center. We are just coming up on our 5th year anniversary on the 17th. If you've never been there before, if you haven't heard us on the radio, New Haven is 5 minutes away from the airport. We are a large funeral center, so we have 30,000 square feet. There is I think you saw the parking lot there, so there's 2 sides to the parking, so you don't ever have to worry about large services, anything like that. This is, you're seeing our foyer, our entryway. Next, you're going to see our family room. That's the area that friends will gather until you're ready for them to join you upstairs for the time of reception. So this is the family room here. We have 4 visitation suites and a chapel that seats just under 300. We are certified shipping specialists, meaning that we can take care of sending your loved ones home and do so often. Pre-planning, that is me. And that gives you a sense of who we are. We often talk about the New Haven family. You come in as strangers and leave as family. And that's something that we really believe and one thing that we really stand behind, right? And I'll tell you for myself, I've been in this industry for many years. And I left because funeral service can be very daunting, as you could expect, right? One thing that I love here is you're allowed to feel. You're allowed to be a human. You're allowed to actually connect with people and have relationship. So I kind of like the fact that we can be community, that we serve. And the reason that it's New Haven Funeral Center, not New Haven Funeral Home, is because we want to be a hub. We want to be able to support you throughout this whole process and the community with community events or anything else. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, did you say Black-owned?
It is Black-owned. I didn't say, but it is Black-owned, definitely. We are a Black-owned funeral center. Absolutely, absolutely. It is also owned, backed by Praise Cathedral, so by church. So it is a Christian and Black-owned funeral center. Having said that, we serve everybody. Not everybody is a Christian that we serve, and that is perfectly fine. Just know that this is who we are. Okay. Let's start with the game. All right. I like to get everybody kind of going. We're a group here so we can kind of do this together. So here is a little game. Don't get started yet. I'm going to invite you to count from 1 to 54. So you have to follow the numbers in order and go from 1 to 54. You have 30 seconds. Any questions? All right, go. You got the time? Thank you. Bless your heart. It's going to watch. Sorry, is my humming distracting? Oh, how are we? 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, what number did you get to, madam?
8.
8, okay. Mama? Oh, she doesn't give up. Okay, all right. Gentlemen? 9, 7, not even 4. No problem, no problem. You got to 2. Anybody else? Anyone get over 9? See, and you were doing this, but you were winning. So congratulations. Okay, so let me see if I can make this a little bit easier for you. Take a look at these dots and these pink lines. If I tell you, wait, is there a thing here? Never mind. If I tell you to look in the top left corner, you'll see 1. Top center corner, you see 2. Top third, top right. Right? You follow, you see the flow? So now with a little bit of direction, I'll get you to do this again. Another 30 seconds, and we'll see if we do better or worse. Boom? Okay, ready? Timer? Go ahead. Almost there. 2, 1, time. How do we do this time? 40. Hey, okay. 23. Hey. 45. 43. Okay. So did we all do better? Wait. Yes? Okay. You got what? 23. Okay, I thought you said you're still at 2. I was like, please. Okay. So the point of this story is simple. With a little bit of instructions, it makes it a lot easier for you to follow the plan. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Giving your family a little bit of instruction, as much as you can give, gets us closer to 54. All right. Nice little quote, because it's always nice to have a quote. Hello. Always plan. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And that's how I like to think about pre-planning. A lot of people wonder, when should I pre-plan? As soon as possible. Do it now. I have done mine. I did mine when I was 20. Granted, I was in the industry, so I think about this, whereas other people might not. But doing it when it's something in the forefront is always better than trying to do it when the time is near. All right. Sheldon. So when Sheldon was here, you guys went over your wills, your power of attorneys, and all of those items. And now, if you weren't there, don't worry, you can watch all of these again. But one thing I want to touch on is most of the time we talk about getting your will done, getting your power of attorney done, and then you've given the information to your family, you're done, right? I'm going to encourage you to consider your living will. Does anyone know what a living will document is? Right? Exactly. This is why I love having these talks. Living wills is going to support your family after you've made those decisions. So you have a power of attorney for health. That is the person who's going to be looking after your medical decisions. Your living will tells them, this is what I want. This is what's important to me. I want to make sure I don't feel pain. I want to make sure that I can stay home. Those kind of documents, those kind of decisions, are what is included in the living will. Even if you wanted to, you could include things like, for your finances, I really want to get into stocks. You know, maybe if I'm not in the abilities to do that myself, I want you to do that for me. It's important, right? So it's beyond just the documents, it's the conversation. Giving your family more instruction, because the more we know, the better we're able to plan. Couple things to include, your must-haves, don't wants. When I say this, I think it's really important that you have what you don't want and mesh it with what you do. So don't just say, I don't want to feel pain, that's it, thank you. But say, what do you want? I want to be able, did I tell you guys the story? My favorite story is a gentleman who says, I want to be able to drink beer and watch the ball game. And that's easy for his family, right? Because now he knows when they're making any decisions, okay, perhaps he has diabetes and he's going to lose a leg. Should we do the surgery? Should we not? Can he still drink a beer? Can he still watch the game? Yes, great, do what you have to do. It gives you a metric, as opposed to simply giving the family what you don't want, because many times they'll be given questions and they'll have to make decisions on things that they might not be aware of. Okay. Next, home, hospice, or hospital. Many times we'll think, okay, I want to pass at home. I think that's important. But you don't really understand, what does that mean for your family beyond you? Maybe your family now, the house is no longer just the family community space, but now it's the space where somebody is passing, where nurses are coming in and all of that is happening, right? So decide whether that's something that everybody wants, just you, or what you guys decide. Hospital. Maybe if you really don't want to feel pain, the hospital might be a better place because they have the supports that are available to support you there as well. Hospice, I don't know if I'd love to talk about hospice care. Hospice care can be available for you in home, at the hospital, or in a center. Hospice is available for someone who is passing. And there are many supports that are available at no cost to the family. You can have somebody come in, you can have someone come in and change, I don't know what they change, I'm not in healthcare in that way, but they can change things for your loved one, catheters and who knows. But they'll be able to support you through that process. So that's something to consider if ever someone is at home. The 5 senses, I like this one because, again, more information. So let's go over our 5 senses and I'll get some audience participation. Sight. What is something that brings you peace to look at? Anybody? The ocean. I just read something about the fact that if we're looking at the water, it actually helps to lower our blood pressure. So, okay, you want to have the ocean. Maybe now we're going to have a digital screen or something in the room that shows the ocean. Or sounds. I'm going to take sounds as well. Hearing the sounds of water, because that might make the space that you're in a little more personal and a little more touching. What about smell? Anyone have something like to smell? Fresh baked. There we go. Fresh baked bread. Maybe somebody, it's bacon, nothing like the smell of bacon in the morning, right? But those kind of things you might want to have in the room. You might want to have wafting through if you're able to. If you're in a hospital, you might not be able to, spritz things around. But maybe if it's fresh baked bread, you go to the bakery and then go visit your loved one. And that scent is on you. It's the little things that we can do. When I talk about, when you did the intro, a good death, that's a term I like to coin. If you are able to take time to plan your passing, those things make a difference. Right? Does it make sense what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay. A little bit? Right? I know. The idea of a good death is strange. And as a funeral director, I see many things, right? Sometimes death might be quick, might not. But if you have an opportunity to discuss with your family, I'm going to say it like 16 million times today, the better off they are when they know what you want. All right, so let's do a little exercise together. I have 5 statements on the screen, and I'll get you to list them in order of priority. This is part of what you would do when you're talking about your living wills. So number 1 is to be treated the way you want, to be free from pain. Number 3, to maintain your dignity. Number 4, to say goodbye to important people. And number 5, to talk about what scares you. So this is not an exercise we're going to do out loud. I just want you to reflect on it and think about what you think would be maybe your top 3 in this list. Perhaps for somebody, it's to be treated the way I want. And in that case, you might not want to hear everybody's opinion on your diagnosis. Perhaps it is to talk about what scares you. Sometimes family find it difficult to have these real conversations. So you need to find somebody, maybe it's clergy, minister, psychologist, someone like that, to help you understand what you're feeling, but you can talk to and talk about how you're feeling. Okay. Did you get a chance to go through and pick your top 3? Yeah? Okay. All right. Let's talk about pre-planning. I am a pre-planning funeral director, which means I help people get their arrangements looked after ahead of time. When I talk about pre-planning your final arrangements, what is the first thing you think about doing? Anybody? Exactly. That's exactly it. Thank you. Doing your cemetery, right? Getting that cemetery plot done. And very often, that is what people think of first. What I do is a combination. The cemetery, I understand. It is land, it is property. You want to lock that in because that price is going to go up. But the first call goes to the funeral home. So don't forget, when you've done your cemetery and you got your plot, you'll also want to do the funeral home side. Who is going to pick you up? Where do you want your service to be? Your caskets and such. Right? So there's 2 sides to doing your pre-planning. Okay? Here's why you want to make pre-planning done. Well, why? That's a very strange sentence. Why you would like to arrange your funeral. First of all, we talked about this before, making your wishes known. So your family know what you'd like to do. Immediate action, that means your family can call immediately. They know what to do. There is no delay. There's no trying to decide where you want your service to be or what you'd like to have done, right? So number 2, immediate action. It also helps on our side because now we have a contract already created and we have permissions given to us saying, okay, we can act on your behalf without any issue. Oh, that's not me. That's okay. Number 3 is a guaranteed price. So when you're prearranging your funeral and you lock it in, meaning you create a contract, you're creating that contract for 2022's prices. Now 2022, this is a very nice time to do it as opposed to paying, I don't know, 2073 prices or whatever the future costs might be. When I say that I did my funeral, back when I was 20, if you look at the price that I would pay for the same thing today, I know that I saved money by doing it then. So that's part of why you want to do your funeral ahead of time. You're going to guarantee that price. Oh, look, let me get my next note. Oh, he's gone with it. Never mind. Talk on my own. That's okay. No problem. Number 4 is affordable payments. So you do have the options when you're doing pre-planning that you can pay it over time. You don't have to pay it in one lump sum. That is something that people definitely appreciate. And like anything else, the younger you are, the cheaper it is, and you have more options. If someone is older when they're making their pre-arrangements, your options are get a little bit less. It's still important to do, but your options for payment go down, right? And we'll talk about that in a sec. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So is that the only cost in the burial, where you're going to be buried? So you buy that lot.
The plot, yeah.
Yeah, and that only cost in terms of pre-planning. I'm sure there's others.
There is, yes, and we can go through it. So when you're pre-planning, you have your funeral cost and you have your cemetery cost. The cemetery, you have the option of purchasing the plot only, meaning that space of land, right? Or you can purchase plot and everything else. Monuments, markers, opening and closing, all of the costs associated with the burial. So having the name up, all of that, the cost to open the grave and to close the grave, you can prearrange all of that. My side, funeral side. Now the funeral side, you're going to arrange your funeral package, meaning the services. You want to have one day of viewing, then the service the next day. You want to have everything on the same day. You want to have which casket, metal casket, wood casket, whatever you choose. You like to have a vault. A vault is what the casket goes in when we go to the cemetery. It's a concrete container that you see the caskets go inside, the lid goes on top, and both get buried. That's how it's done over here. If you're looking back home, so for me, I'm Antiguan, back home the vaults are already in the ground. All of that, flowers, programs, all of that you can prearrange. I like to say it's up to you. If you want to prearrange everything up to the curry goat, you can, right? But maybe you want to, finances, right? It depends on what you can afford to pay. Maybe you want to just prearrange the services and casket. In that case, you've got the 2 big expenses covered, and then your family can use whether there's insurance money or whatever you have afterwards to cover the other costs. Okay? Madam, you had a question as well?
I did. So does your services also include the option if cremation is an option?
Yes. So if you're choosing to be cremated, you can still decide if you want to have a funeral or not. You can still decide if you want to have your body present for the service or not. So let's say you decide to have what might be decided, a same-day service. In that case, you'll have viewing for an hour or so, then the service will take place, and then after the service, you can make your way to be cremated. Now you have a choice. You can still involve pallbearers. You can have pallbearers, carry you out to the vehicle, and we do something called a drive-away. In that case, you get the same feeling of closure as someone might have watching the casket being buried, right? So there are still those options. Now the cremation itself will be done at a cemetery. After the cremation has taken place, the next decision is, what do you want to do with your cremated remains? Because many times people will get cremated and say, I want to be cremated, it's fine, but then your family doesn't know what you'd like to do with them. So consider that as well. Do you want them to be buried? Do you want them to be kept at home? What would you like? Okay? Oui, madame.
So that's a dry burial?
A dry burial. A drive away? Yeah, the drive away is, so at the end of the service, if someone is choosing to be cremated, you'll have your pallbearers come up into the chapel or wherever we're having the service. They'll carry the casket out to the vehicle, load the casket into the vehicle, and then we would watch the vehicle drive away. And that's that feeling of closure, watching your loved ones pass, right? Watching them leave. So you get that same feeling as when we're at the cemetery. Yeah. Yeah, great questions. A couple other reasons why we prearrange is identity theft protection. So these last two are additional services that you can add on to a prearrange. When I say you can do as much as, the curry goat, you can add these things on. The final document service is one that helps your executor. So if you have paperwork throughout, if you have signed up for subscriptions and all of that, and your loved one now has to go through and find those documents, that is something that we can support you with. Also protecting your identity, clearly. The last one is worldwide travel protection. So if you would like to be buried here in Canada, and if you're traveling anywhere in the world, let's say I've gone on vacation in Antigua, but I want to make sure that I am buried here in Canada. Yes, you get the travel plan. And that covers all the costs to bring you back here, any funeral home costs there, if your loved one has to go from here to sign documents and brings you back, right? So that's available.
Okay.
Good to know though on the flip side. If I don't care where I'm buried, right? And you make a pre-arrangement in Ontario and I'm in Antigua and I pass there, call the funeral home, let us know, and then we pay out in Canadian dollars to the funeral home or to your beneficiary, wherever you are. Yeah, so your money's not lost. Yeah, we can only keep, any funeral home can only keep the funds for the services that we're providing. So in the middle of the pandemic, we had families who had prearranged full receptions, but we weren't able to offer anything. The money for the receptions has to be returned to the family. We can't keep that because it was prearranged. Yeah. Now, when I'm talking about prearranging, there's two options. There's a not guaranteed and there's a guaranteed option. If it is not guaranteed, it is the beginning process. It's giving me your information. Let me know what your wishes are. Let me know all of your vital statistics, because that's the stuff that your family's going to struggle to get. Social insurance, parents' names, mother's maiden name. That's where people typically get a little stumped. So you can give me all of that ahead of time. You can choose your services, your casket, all of that. And what we do is create a file. No contract is created, no money is exchanged, but I know what you'd like to have. Option one. Option two is guaranteeing the funeral. In that case, you're creating the contract, you're going through, and now this is where the immediate action takes place because we already have your permission to do this. And this is where you're guaranteeing the price because you're paying it down today. Okay. Now, this is kind of what we were talking about before. What are funeral costs and what's included? So let's say that you wanted a traditional service. In that case, it's a day of viewing, so people can come, you have a viewing time, and then the service takes place, be it at the chapel, church, wherever you'd like it to be. It includes stationery, so in this case, it's basic stationery, so you take a one-page program, open it up, you have a booklet for everyone for the service, you have some flowers, and you have the burial cost. So all of that together is about $22,000. However, this is a very, very, very generic quote, okay? It can change drastically depending on where your cemetery is. This is land, it's property. So if you're looking at the city, Mount Pleasant, Prospect Cemetery, those downtown, you're at the 30,000. If you're looking at something a little bit further out of the city, maybe like a Glen View, that's where we're at right now with the 12,000. Right? So it gives you an idea of how much the costs are. And again, it ranges if you're doing everything at the cemetery or if you're just getting your plot. When you're prearranging, you have time with hope. So now you can say, I'm going to get the plot now. I'm going to get my services and my casket now. Let me pay for those things because that I want to lock in those prices. Maybe you're going to pay it over 5 years. And then later on you can say, okay, I've got that done. Now I'll add on all the rest. You have options. Or you might say, I'm going to get this done and then use insurance for the rest. Questions about this? If you want to create your own funeral plan, you can go to our website. We have an online planner. So you can actually go online, choose if you're making arrangements for yourself or somebody else, and then choose what kind of service you want, what kind of caskets. All of that is listed there so you can see how much it might be. And then if we have time at the end, we can go through and do a couple examples together. Okay. Any questions on the costs? No? This is right now. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. I talked about this a little bit at the start, but when is the best time to pre-plan? The younger you are, the better. This is a sensitive topic. It is much easier when we sit down and have a talk about pre-planning while we're now thinking about the future. We're thinking about estate planning, the same way you do your wills, the same way you do insurance, your financial plans. I'm doing my funeral plan, get it all done, put it in the file, closed. As opposed to when someone has been giving a diagnosis, when you get the call or when the doctor says, okay, please start making your arrangements. At that time, unless you really want to, you don't have to. Take your time and spend it with your loved one. Call the funeral home, let us know this is the situation, this is where your loved one is, and then that's enough. You don't have to come. A lot of times we feel, I was talking to some people, we were at the women's show this weekend, and these ladies came through and we're talking about pre-planning, and they said, oh yeah, that's what you do when somebody is sick and dying. I said, no, you want to do that now, when it's part of your estate plan. At that point, when someone is going through that process, you want to be present and hopefully have it done. And if not, and you want to, we'll help you through the process, but you don't need to start paying for everything or going through that at the time. Okay, let me tell you a story. So here's the story of Keisha and Carol. Keisha is the daughter, Carol is the mom. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's not one that is uncommon to us in the industry. So Carol found out that she had a diagnosis, and she decided that she was going to go on the trip of a lifetime. So she took off and went to Greece. She called her best friend. They had a wonderful time in Greece, but unfortunately, Carol passed while on vacation there. Her friend calls Keisha, her daughter, and says, okay, here's the situation. What do you want us to do? Keisha's at a loss. You don't know what to do, what your next steps are, because nothing was planned. She has a brother. Her brother said, let's bring mom home. Keisha's overwhelmed, and so she says, no, let's just have her cremated there, and then they can ship her cremated remains home because I'm overwhelmed already. Now, this is the first time that Keisha and brother Brian are having a little bit of a tete-a-tete because they're disagreeing on how to honor their mom. Turns out Greece didn't have, at the time of this happening anyway, Greece didn't have a crematorium, so mom had to come home. The process, though, of dealing with another country, another language, another funeral home, another set of customs, as you can imagine, is quite overwhelming. Something like the travel plan, that's a support, because in that case, you have someone else helping you through it. Regardless, you're going to want to make sure, I'm going to get out of my story, I'll get through some of the details afterwards, but you'll want to make sure that you have your insurance in place to support you in case anything like that should happen. Now, her mom comes home. They're going over their funeral arrangements, talking to the funeral home and that. Again, Keisha and Brian, they're having a few issues because they're not necessarily seeing eye to eye. Now they arrive at the funeral home. She does not want to have a funeral service for her mom. She's like, we already spent all this money. I think it cost them, about $15,000 to bring mom home. So they already spent all that on that process. She doesn't want to spend all the money again at the funeral home. Understandable. But her brother says, listen, I talked to mom. She wanted to have a service. We should do something. Sister says no. Turns out, while she's, having her moment with the family, she has decided, no, we're not doing this. But instead of having a funeral service, she chooses a really expensive casket, which, to us, it doesn't really make sense. But in the grief and in the feelings and with all the extra pressure, she made this decision. Now again, with the family, there's a divide because here you are spending money on the casket, but you could have spent the money on the service and done what we had wanted. Service takes place. Keisha's going through some documents. She's looking, through the case. If you've ever been an executor, if you've ever gone through the process of closing someone's estate, you know what it is like when you're going through that paper. I like to call it the briefcase, or maybe it's a closet, wherever the paperwork is. So when she's going through that, she finds out that, yes, mom actually did want to have a funeral service. You can imagine how she feels now after the fact. You've already, kiboshed the whole plan. And you can't necessarily turn to your brother anymore because you drew such a hard line in the sand, so that connection, that support isn't necessarily there anymore. She goes through a few more things. She has a little bit of a difficult time paying some of the bills and ends up paying it out of her own pocket rather than having money for that. And she expresses a few other issues with her family, with the insurance company, and while closing the estate. I'm going to cut it as I look at my time. But let's talk about some of the issues that she had while closing her estate. The point of this story is it's not ideal, but it's not uncommon. And here are some things that she could have done or can be done to support us in the future. So the unpredictability of death. We talked about this. It is difficult to know when, of course, when someone will pass. And we talked about what happens when you're traveling. So we've kind of gone through this already. Make sure, I talked about it quickly with regards to the insurance. You're going to want to make sure that even if you don't have a travel plan, you don't need to. If you want it, get it from the funeral home. If not, check your insurance. A lot of us buy our flights with our credit cards, right? You're going to want to check, what does that cover? And is it a reimbursement? Because a lot of that coverage hasn't changed. You know, like the death benefit hasn't changed in many, many years. A lot of those coverages haven't changed in many years as well. So you'll want to make sure that if it's $7,000, if it's $3,000, is that enough to cover any injury? And is it enough to cover costs to bring you back home? Without a plan in place, will your loved ones agree on every decision made? Here's where I pause. At the funeral home, the story I told you was Keisha and her brother, right, going over the casket and that. At the funeral home, without a plan, it's a matter of honoring mom in the best way you can. Now, I have a brother. If he and I went to the funeral home, if she told me, just do, everyone says, just something simple, it doesn't matter. Okay. I get to the funeral home. To me, something simple means, a wood casket, something, I know what that means in my mind. I know without a shadow of a doubt that my simple does not align with my brother's simple. His simple is going to be something a little bit fancier, a little bit nicer, with all the extra bells and whistles. So I know already that we won't agree there. And it gets a little bit more difficult, if you've ever gone through this process, with the others. Because that's where the family, the friends, everybody else starts speaking, saying, you can't put her in that. You got to have a reception. You got to have this. You got to have. But a lot of times they have opinions, but they're not necessarily supporting you in the financial aspect as well. And we do not want to be putting ourselves in debt trying to uphold standards that are not necessary. So by having a prearrangement done, by making that decision, especially with regards to the casket, now when other people have something to say, it shows it right there. This is what she wanted. I think that is the most important phrase for families, because now there's no more debate. There's no more question, because you know that this is what she wanted. You know that she wanted to have a reception. I had a lady, she's like, I want to plan my reception with sandwiches. I don't want all this food, all this extra. So she did the sandwiches knowing that everyone's going to come in and go, sandwiches? But she said, I want them to know that this is what I decided. And I loved it because I said, well, if not, you know what the family's going to do. Okay. Any questions on this? Yes, Lynn.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I've always wondered how people, especially with an unexpected death, how they go through the process of planning the funeral, and you look at Keisha and Ryan, how they were at odds. They weren't in agreement with a lot of things. And when you are, just in that fresh state of grief, how you can make a decision that probably not the best. And it always wondered, how do people do that? But because I never really thought of pre-planning. I mean, generally you don't think of that. But yeah.
No, but you're right. I see it like that's, so for me, I started doing at need, meaning at the time that someone passes. So I was serving families and arrangements. And because of my experiences there is why I started focusing on pre-planning. Because you see, I remember certain families, I see them sitting down there and you're dealing with the grief in addition to everything else. You probably haven't slept, you haven't eaten, and you're trying to make very important decisions that is going to satisfy not just yourself, your soul, but everybody else around you. It is difficult, and I will say in this day and age, it is getting more difficult because, I don't know, people are focused on me and what's important to me, and it gets difficult for families, right? So in these moments, I can tell you, I've seen fights, I've seen everything. It's important to try to come together and to get more support. But you're right. It's not easy. It's not easy. You're going through a lot while trying to make a lot of decisions. Okay? Yeah. Paperwork. All right. I spoke quickly about the briefcase. When it comes to paperwork, there is a lot of paperwork that will need to be completed. We mentioned I'm taking my CEA, my course to support executors. So I'm learning more and more about what is actually involved in closing an estate. Now, I spoke to a family before, and she said her daughter asked her, I want to start making pre-arrangements, Mom. I think it's important that we do this. And Mom said, stop, go into that shelf, open the drawer, and that's where you're going to see all your important paperwork. Please, if there's anything you take from this, please do that. Let your family know where all of your important documents are so it's easier for them to find them. If they're stored in the cloud or wherever they might be, please share that information. That way you're alleviating some of their struggle. Here are some people that need to be informed. And this is not a full list, of course, but this is an idea of who needs to be notified. So a lot of these things we can help you with. We'll give you documents to help you with notifying CPP. We'll notify the government to stop the social insurance number to help protect their identity, because that's also another big one. We will help you with spousal support, children's support, all of those things you apply to the government for. But there are many others. Things like property, pensions, retirement income, subscriptions, that's a big one, and people don't actually think about that one. I always hint on it because no one thinks about that until you're near the end of everything you have to do. But if you're like me and you've got things coming out of your credit card each month that you intended to close, you need to ensure that those are closed. As an executor, has anyone here been an executor before? Okay, as an executor, you are responsible for their account. Now, if there's a mortgage, it still needs to be paid. You're responsible for that. If there is a pet, you're responsible for that. As you're going through all these items, if you are letting money automatically come out of the account because you didn't cancel it, and that money could have been going to the beneficiaries come after you for that. So it's very important that you are organized. Seek support if you need it. If it's a large estate, seek support, get counsel, get legal counsel, and let them help you through closing this estate, because there's a lot to do. Okay? So something like the final document service I talked about before will kind of guide you through what needs to be done. Mara.
Oh, no, you were just saying the final document service, that's something. I was just going to share, I know my mom has something, like a little blue book that she got from Blue Cross called Why Keep It Secret. And in every section it has like the bank accounts that I have, the this, the that. And she pulled it out and had it since I was 2.
Yes.
So that's just something, but obviously you guys have to give us more details and more cards.
Well, this one helps you on the other side. The final document service helps when the person has passed. Something like that, or even my First Steps workbook here, helps you in organizing your affairs. They're not exhaustive lists, same thing. They get you started in the process, though, of what you need to put in the list, because that might be the hard part. You don't even know what you need to keep a record of.
I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more, especially in this world that we're living in, very technological and digital, in terms of passwords. You know now everybody, everything that we're doing now, you have to have a password. So how do you suggest people manage that?
Digital assets is a huge industry right now, learning how to protect those. There are many schools of thought. I can't tell you what I would suggest. I'll tell you what is out there. Some people will say, put all of your passwords in a folder, write them down, and put them in a folder and keep it with your documents. Some people will say, I think the easiest thing to do, because that gets a little tricky, the easiest thing to do is to share your passwords with your executor now. Difficult? Yes. Maybe you don't necessarily want to share everything. But if they have access to it in life, they will be able to have access to it in death. Something like your Instagram, something like Facebook, or even Gmail, they have memorials, not Instagram, sorry, but Facebook and Gmail have memorials set up. So you can actually set up in your Gmail account, if it is inactive for a certain period of time, give access to this person. Same thing with Facebook. In case, because if not, they control your account. Facebook, if you don't set anything up, Facebook controls your account. Instagram controls your account. Your family does not have access or control of it. So you'll want to make sure that you're setting it up in such a way that they do. Passwords? It's a fun new way. I'm just reading this book right now, and if you're interested, you're welcome to. It's called Your Digital Executor, and she's going through some of those ways that you can protect your digital assets. Yeah. There's also, sorry, one other thing. There are some will cloud services, you know, like where you can keep all of your documents in the cloud, and you can put your passwords as well in that cloud. So when whoever it is, your executor, has access to those documents, they'll have access to everything there as well. The only thing is you have to keep it updated. And the way that we have to change our passwords into everything and our date of birth and blood, right? You got to go back in and change it every time. Yeah. It's a good thing, but it's a lot. Okay. I know you just had a talk about insurance, and I like to mention the difference between a funeral pre-plan and insurance. Because many people will say, I have my insurance, so my funeral is covered. There's two different things here, right? Your insurance monies are going to be paid out to a beneficiary. They use those funds to cover items like your hydro, mortgage, care bills for children, distribute to your family for generational wealth. All of that is what that money can be used for. It also can be used for your funeral. However, if your money for your funeral is in your insurance, you need to make sure that there's enough money to cover whatever the future cost of the funeral might be. Years ago, when I was first starting in the industry, they had that funeral death insurance, and it was $10,000. And I don't know if you remember, but you'd see it on the radio, on the TV all the time, on the radio, get this $10,000 funeral insurance. You see how much a funeral costs now. So you need to make sure that if you're going that way, you have enough to cover whatever that future might be and the cost that your family will have to pay at the time. Because when I talked about Keisha having issues with paying bills and paying it out of her own pocket, you want to avoid that as much as possible. Pull everything from the estate, pay from the estate, and once all those bills are covered for the estate, then the beneficiaries get their funds. If you're an executor, you do not give beneficiaries their funds until all of the estate has been closed, you've filed your final tax return, you know that the estate has been cleared, and then you can distribute funds. Okay? So, the funeral plan now is separate from that. This is only for your funeral. The funds that you pay here are just going to cover your funeral cost. They lock in the funeral cost, and that's it. Okay? So they're separate, whereas the insurance money is going to be used for a lot more. Okay? Life stories. Life stories is something that I really picked up when I took the course to learn what end-of-life doulas do. End-of-life doulas are the ones who support your loved one and support the family at the time that someone has passed, or is passing, sorry. And one thing that they do is hold vigil and create a life journey process. So when someone is in hospital, when someone is at home and they're passing, this is a great time to connect family, to connect the grandkids, and to really be with them. Because you know, you come, you sit at the hospital, and you run out of things to say. There's nothing else to say. You're there, but you're trying to be present, but it gets a little awkward, especially if friends are coming through. This is a great thing that you can be doing actively, and you're sharing their story. So now you're asking, Grandma, tell me a little bit about you. Tell me some of your story. Write it down, create videos, record it. I did this with my grandfather, and I'm so happy I did, because I heard all these stories about his life that I never would have heard before. And this is how, when we talk about our legacy, you have your financial legacy that you're going to pass on, but you also have your life legacy. Your history, the experiences that you've had, you want to share that on with the next generation so they know where we came from and where we're going. And we get that by sharing these stories. So this is my little push. Share your story, even now. Share it with your loved ones, share it with your family, so we know who you are. Especially as Black Canadians, a lot of our history hasn't been shared. You know, we know big things, but a lot of our, like I didn't know about the Canadian domestic scheme. I didn't know what that was until 2 years ago in 2020. That's how a lot of Caribbean people came to Canada, right? And there I have a grandmother who I just didn't even know that was a part of the process. So, ending points, plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead. Decide what's important to you, where do you want to start? There's a lot to do. You're in a 5-part series here. There is a lot to do with regards to planning your estate. Decide where you want to start. Work on one thing at a time and kind of work your way through there. Talk to your loved ones, let them know what you would like, and start today. Pick one thing that you can do today. And a question I often get is, how do I have this conversation with my parents? Because a lot of them say, you know, I want you to talk about this. We want to talk about this, but once you do, you want me for dead. And so they don't want to continue, right? So we have to learn, how do we bring this up with my family? What you do, I like to use me. First, use me. I went to a talk today. She said that I should talk to you about planning ahead. Can you tell me if you want to be buried or cremated? Can you tell me if you want to have a funeral service? Can you tell me a song that you want to have at your funeral? Start with one thing. Ease into it. Because not everybody is ready to sit down with the paperwork and say, okay, let's talk about everything right now, right? Maybe you're going to ease them in. The second thing you can do is do it yourself and bring them with you. Whether you guys choose to prepay everything or you're just coming and getting the information. I'm going to do this. I would like you to come with me. I went and spoke to Manel about this. She's cool. It wasn't hard. It was comfortable. I vetted her. Do you want to go and see her too? Ways to ease them in. Last one is in the breakfast. I like to use breakfast. You know, you're just kind of talking and you just slip something out. You know, like while they're getting ready in the morning, you just kind of, hey, you know, I heard about New Haven on the radio. That's a nice place, right? Yeah. You ease the process. You ease the conversation in. Okay. I have a gift for you. You have the booklet. It's in your booklet as well, and there's a little card here that might make it a little easier for you. You can scan the QR code or go to the website. And then from there, you'll get a booklet. We call it the First Steps Workbook. That's what I'm talking about. We'll get you started if you're starting from nothing, but you want to start this process. It will talk to you about your funeral. You can start putting in some notes as to what kind of funeral you want to have. You can put in some notes as to where certain documents are. You can even put in some notes as to who your family is and what your family tree might look like. So it's a good place to start putting down some of your wishes. I thank you. Do you have any questions for me about funeral planning, estate planning, or the like? Wow. I did such a good job. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.